r/askreddit. People who cut contact with their parents, what happened?
This year I cut any contact with my mom. A few years ago when my parents divorced, I chose to move out with my mom and her parents and cut contact with my dad and siblings for almost 2 years. I loved her to the moon and back. I saw her as my hero, my guardian angel, but I was just a kid and I was dumb. She never really wanted me to take care of me. She wanted someone to take care of her, and of her feelings, to provide for her, to listen to her complainings which were too much for me. I was 14 then, just started high school. It was hard, but not as hard as the last year when she got married again. Her new husband hated me, and didn't even try to hide it. He screamed at me all the time, for the dumbest things, even for things that he'd done. He also looked through my window in my room at night when I was changing, and entering in my room at night and watch me sleep, even tried to hit me once. My mom only believed him, and never listened what I had to say. She finally decided to listen what I have to say when my sister told her ISH because of them, but didn't believe me, and took his side. Then he came there, she told him what I said to her and then she made her beat me while he watched.
I ran away after a few months after I turned 18. I moved in with my boyfriend and I cut any contact with them. They still try to contact me to explain to me why IT isn't their fault and I wanted that. I talked to my boyfriend's family and if it happens again, I will request a restraining order against them. Dad beat me as a kid, and then when I confronted him about it as an adult he said that there's no way he could ever be wrong about anything, and that he's thought about it and is definitely fine with what he did. On Thursday 17th of October 2019 my father and I traveled to visit my granny's, his mother, on account of granny being very unwell. It had been the first time since 2007 that I had been at my granny's. Starting at 6:30 in the morning, the trip required a 6-hour car journey to get a 2 p.m. ferry crossing. Starting at 6:30 in the morning, the trip required a 6-hour car journey to get a 2 p.m. ferry crossing. Starting at 6:30 in the morning, the trip required a 6-hour car journey to get a 2 p.m. ferry crossing. Starting at 6:30 in the morning, the trip required a 6-hour car journey to get a 2 p.m. ferry crossing. My father notices me in this room, but nothing happens. I smell a distinct odor of alcohol on the bedside table. After having dinner with Granny and my uncle, his brother, around 10 p.m. I go to the same room again and then a few minutes later my father comes in, gets really angry and demands to know what I am doing in his room. So apparently it wasn't my room anymore. I respond I made a mistake, however he accuses me of deliberately entering this room on purpose, which, to be fair, was true. He starts shouting. My uncle comes to see what the noise was and then my father tells me to get out and into my room. On Friday morning I get up and have a bowl of porridge for breakfast around 10 a.m. My father walks into the kitchen, upon seeing me still in my pajamas, remarks with absolute disgust look at you and angrily tells me that I am being blocked out of his will, that he is sending me home the next day and is never, ever seeing me ever again. Throughout all of this I remain silent and he further remarks that I am not deaf. Not long after leaving the bowl of porridge before finishing as I had disliked it, I go out for a walk for about an hour. After returning to the house by 1 p.m. and it was just me and my father along with Granny and the dog, as my uncle had left by this point, around 2 p.m. he asked me to help with kitchen chores. I entered the kitchen and the bowl of porridge was still sitting on the kitchen table where I had left it. I start to wash some dishes at the kitchen sink while my father sat at the table behind me. For the entire time that I was doing this, for more than half an hour, he proceeds to speak in an extremely angry and aggressive tone. He first of all accuses me of outright refusing to eat the porridge. He would then make comments such as I have wasted my life and how he pays taxes for people like me to do nothing all day and how my mom doesn't do anything to help me tackle the various problems I have. He calls her a cow and says how he offered to support my brother to find a place of his own, but he apparently refused to accept his help. He further mentions how he offered to support me while I was at primary school, when I was only roughly 6 to 7 years old, but I supposedly refused this help also. Throughout this entire time, I remained silent. When he demanded that I respond to a question or something, he would angrily shout answer me or I need an answer repeatedly but I stood my ground. He would then say in an irritated tone please yourself when I would not give him a response. All of this became so unbearable after a while that I started crying and wailing for it to stop, but he continues regardless. He comes up to the right of me. I felt like hitting him, though I refrained from doing so. He goes out for a few moments after this. There was a knife to the left of me on the kitchen top and I was extremely tempted to pick it up and stab myself with it, just so he would stop. After I finish in the kitchen, he further demands that I give him Mom's mobile number, but I refuse. He says not to worry, he'll get it from my brother. Not long after this I phoned Mom to tell her about all of this and how upset I was, and for her to tell my brother to not give my father her mobile number. He angrily barges into my room without knocking and demands to know who I was phoning. I say that I was phoning mom about how he was upsetting me and giving me hell, and then proceeds to walk out of the room confidently remarking that he doesn't think so. Shortly after this, he comes into my room again and starts speaking to me for nearly half an hour, though in a much calmer tone. He comments that mom is using me as a piggy in the middle to get back at him, which, for a fact, is completely untrue, and that if I applied for any job, regardless of what job it is and how well qualified I may be for it, I would automatically be rejected on account of my weight. As he describes it, let's hire someone else. He also claims that he is not against me. Later he asks if I was going to shave, which I reply that I didn't want at that time to, but he further responds that he wants me to, and to shave every morning, as that is what normal people do. He also tells me not to be afraid of the dog and it won't harm me. A while later he calls me into the kitchen to start the dishwasher. However, after stating that I did now know how, he responds that he simply wanted to prove a theory in which I pretended to be a genius. As I exit the kitchen and heading towards my room, he follows me out of the kitchen and tells me to go my room, and also very angrily tells me that I am never to interfere in his affairs ever again. A while later he barges into my room again without knocking and sits down beside me. He raises his fist as if ready to punch me. I say, "Go on, hit me. You've been wanting to do that for the past day." Later we go out for a walk with the dog. But just as we go out, however, I look at my phone for only about 2 seconds for any app notifications. He notices this, and reacts incredibly angry. Just as we exit through the kitchen door at the back and we go around the house to the front, he proceeds to rant very angrily on about how he does not understand my generation's obsession with mobile phones, and when he was younger, the nearest phone was a few miles away from the house and it served him just fine. While we are out for the walk, along a road not far from the house, we stop and turns around to say in a disappointed tone that I promised him that I would shave, despite having said earlier that I did not want to. He then suggests that we both return to the house and that I go on ahead with the dog. He proceeds to speak in the same angry tone as before that this trip wasn't such a waste, because, in his words, it shows what I'm really like. He further says that he's sending me home the next day and he's never ever seeing me ever again. Not long after we both return to the house, he has a phone conversation with mom after getting her number from my brother. Afterwards I find him in the kitchen speaking to himself in an irritated tone that if mom thinks he is a bad man, so be it. Shortly after this he calms down a bit when we have dinner, around 6:30, and says let's forget about sending me home the next day. After having dinner I settle in the living room away from him, and for the first time I am actually left alone and things are relevantly peaceful for the next couple of hours before I decide to go to sleep. The next 3 days, when I was finally able to leave on Tuesday morning, did not improve in the slightest.